Yo, you really have no idea. I'm about to break this down. And this kind of information is always hidden from the public eye. And for good reason, right? Because if this kind of information was to spread as fast and wide as somebody like me wants it to, then the whole world is going to change. The whole world is going to be flipped upside down. So the Yahweh that you were taught about in Sunday school, the Yahweh that you were taught about when you were in Christianity or maybe even in Islam, even the Yahweh that atheists were taught about, that is not who atheists or who Yahweh originally was. You see, the story was changed and evolved and absorbed and even kind of conjured through a different telescope through time. I guess what I'm trying to say is that these spirits are real and they transform and they change things around them. And even they can manipulate humanity to change their own stories. I know that sounds bizarre, so make sure you pay attention to this presentation. So many people assume Yahweh, the God of Israel, has always been worshipped the same way, but in reality, ancient Israelites had complex ideas about Yahweh and often connected him with other deities like El. One of the most intriguing questions is, did Yahweh and El originally have horns? In this presentation, we're going to break down all of this. I'm talking about the name of Yahweh, the horns on Yahweh's head that nobody wants to talk about and that people are terrified about, but we're going to go over why you should not be terrified about the fact that your God has horns. So yeah, pay attention. So who was El? Let's really tackle this first. El was the chief god of the Canaanite pantheon, worshipped before and alongside Yahweh. He was often depicted as a bull or a horned deity, symbolizing strength and kingship. The name Israel literally means struggles with El, showing El's early importance. This is super, super important because when people read about El, people always just assume that all these gods or all these names of different gods are one God. When you read the Bible, you just assume you're always reading about one God. But in reality, there are multiple gods in the text. And if you're a Christian or a Muslim or have any religion, this should not be bad news for you. Learning the truth about the scriptures should bring you an excitement. There's more to know. I mean, did you really think you knew all there was to know about these ancient texts? These divine texts? Let's go further. So horns in the Bible. Let's get right to it. Let's get right to the controversy. Why is Elohim teaching people that Yahweh was depicted with horns? For what reason? Okay, in Numbers 23:22 and 24:8, these verses describe the powerful horns of a wild ox. But who has the horns? Now, some scholars, just to say, they do argue that it refers to Israel, and some argue that it refers to Yahweh. But you got to understand, the imagery of horns was something that many gods had, like Baal. And it was really supposed to speak to their strength. So you shouldn't really fear this. But I mean, if you don't believe me, go look in the more updated translations, like the New American Bible Revised Edition. It says, God who brought them out of Egypt is for them like the horns of a wild ox, right? Number 2, Revised Standard Version says, God brings them out of Egypt. They have, as it were, the horns of the wild ox. Trees of Life Version says, God is bringing them from Egypt with the strong horns of the wild ox. And then there's the Bible in Basic English. It is God who has taken them out of Egypt. His horns are like those of the mountain ox. So the question is, why do we have these different translations? You know, this is one of the issues with thinking that the Bible says something in particular, right? You have these different translations. Some people like to use the worst translations because it's the ones that they grew up with, like the King James Version, even though it doesn't have the updates of the most recent transcripts or manuscripts. And those who don't really study this stuff don't really care. So that's fine. And I understand that. You're not here to know the truth. You're here to confirm your biases about God and what feels the best for you. And actually, I think that's fine. I don't think there's a problem with that. But on this side of the internet, we're here to get at the actual information. We want to know the author's intent. So why are some translators translating it like, let's say, Israel has horns, which is weird. Like, why would Israel have horns? And then why are some people translated as unicorn or whatever? And why are some people just taking out the whole fact that Yahweh has horns in the first place? Why are these variations happening? Well, I think there's a bias about horns just amongst humans. In fact, I know there is for sure. Because the Bible is not even the only place where Yahweh is depicted with horns, right? So if you found in Sinai or Kontelet Ajrud, features in scriptures referring to Yahweh and his Asherah. Okay, so you got to understand that even though the scriptures have something written, that everybody didn't even believe in what these scriptures said necessarily, or the oral traditions. There were different oral traditions, and the people who got to write them down, those were the elites. Those weren't the everyday person, the everyday people of the world, right? Those were the elites, the people at the very top. But the people in the everyday world, they had different interpretations of Yahweh. And matter of fact, they had the most popular interpretation. You shouldn't really confuse what elitists write down in history and what was popular for the time. And evidence of this is the drawing that depicts Yahweh with the bull-like features, right? The horns on his head, reinforcing the idea of a horned Yahweh. This suggests early Israelite religion blended elements of the Canaanite El and Yahweh. Because remember, El had horns. Now, this whole blending gets it gets crazier. And by the way, even though I wrote it like this in the presentation, here we do abstract history. So again, I think the intangible, the abstract, is influencing humanity. I think Yahweh's spirit, whether you think it's conscious or not, are influencing these things, right? Yahweh wants to be associated with El Elyon, or El, the Most High Creator God. Yahweh wants to take the place of Hadad, who was originally in this particular part of the Near East, the top god of the pantheon. Yahweh is here to take the place of these deities, and he has to take on their attributes. Now, he can't absorb the spirit of the creator, right? God, right? Or who we perceive of that. I mean, it's just vastly too big, but he can absorb some of those attributes here on earth, and he can also absorb the entire attributes of other deities, but that's a topic for another day. Okay, so horns in other cultures. So horns were a universal symbol of divine power in ancient Near East. Baal, Enlil, and Amun, right, who was from Egypt, were all depicted with horns. Okay, so you got to understand that. These gods were all, this was normal at a certain point in time that gods were depicted with horns, whether it was Yahweh, El, who are both biblical gods, Hadad, or / Baal, Enlil, Amun. This was normal. If Yahweh was associated with El and Baal, he likely inherited their horn symbolism, right? He took on, or he absorbed, those attributes. Now, where does the name Yahweh come from? So let's get to the name, all right? Because there's so much online. People talk about the name of Yahweh, and people get it so critically wrong. I mean, it's some really cool guesses, like Yahweh is the Yahweh, right? Like, that's cool. It's not, I don't think it's true. I don't think there's any scholarship behind that, but it's interesting, right? But the oldest reference to Yahweh comes from an ancient Kemet, right? The oldest one that we got, right? It's really cool. It's this tribe of Shasu, right? Where you see Yahweh written up on the wall. Now, you got to understand that the ancient Kemetic people, they wrote things down. When they didn't like somebody, they wrote it up on the walls. And they didn't like the Shasu. The Shasu were known to be raiders. They were herders, but they're known to be raiders. They were known to steal. They're known to cause issues with the trade routes between Kemet and Canaan and other places. And so they really didn't like them. And they said that the land they came from was the land of Yahweh. Now, that's interesting. The land of Shashi was the land of Yahweh, because this is the first time in history we have Yahweh being mentioned. And most scholars agree that this was just, so at this time, to know contextually, different cultures used to have a patron deity, like a deity of protection over their land, and they would name their land in accordance with that deity. They would name it after that deity. And so pretty much the Shashu's god was Yahweh. This is a very exciting find in history. And it's the first ever, ironically, the first mention of Yahweh is ancient Kemet, is ancient Egypt. That is fascinating, like, to me. But anyway, the Mesha Stele also mentions Yahweh, but Yahweh's origins are mysterious. Okay, was he originally a desert god, a warrior god? We really don't know. Yahweh is a very fascinating God because there's a lot of mystery, and I don't think that's a coincidence. Again, I think that the spirit wants to be mysterious. If you didn't know, just to give you a little detail about, spirits, spirit is an essence, and an essence is a collection of attributes that make something what it is, right? That's what a spirit is. It's not like this Hollywood goofy stuff. But anyway, everything has a matrix. What is a matrix? A matrix is a medium or structure in which you develop. And the etymology of the word matrix is mater, which means womb, right? So everything has a womb, including, not to go into convergent evolution and Nietzsche's, I don't have time to go into that, but if you really want to destroy something abstract, you have to destroy its matrix, because as long as the matrix is there, then that abstract being could be reborn, right? And then it will influence the physical and manifest through the physical. And so I actually don't think it's a coincidence that you don't know where Yahweh specifically comes from. Anyway, that's getting really nerdy when it comes to abstract history. If you're interested in that, stay to the end of the video. We have a great book that breaks all of that down in a way that you wouldn't believe, that's going to change your entire life. But the pronunciation debate, okay, about Yahweh. The name Yahweh consists of 4 Hebrew consonants. I always pronounce this word wrong, so bear with me. The tetragrammation. No vowels were written, so we don't know exactly how it was pronounced. I know, that's crazy. We don't really know. Isn't that crazy? They already say don't say his name, but it is interesting that this sacred name, Yahweh, we don't even know how to pronounce it. I mean, that is fascinating, right? Isn't that fascinating? Anyway, maybe I'm just nerding out about that, right? But again, I think that these spirits actually influence history. So this stuff is exciting to me. The possible pronunciation is Yahweh, Yehovah, Yahweh, and but we can't really be sure. We don't know. We don't know. But there are people online who try to say Jehovah and Yahweh are 2 different deities, and one is, they just don't like the fact that Yahweh can be associated with a pantheon. I mean, they're going to have to get over it. So I am that I am. Okay. This is a huge misunderstanding. This whole I am that I am, family, yo, big misunderstanding here. Many believe God's name is I am, based on Exodus 3:14, but really there he was saying Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh. So Yahweh does not mean I am that I am. That's one. In Hebrew, it was Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh. I could be saying that wrong, by the way. So go look up the pronunciation of that Hebrew. Don't go around saying it like I say it. However, this is not a name, but a statement of being. Okay? Yahweh's name is likely related to the Hebrew word Yahweh. Yahweh. We don't know if that was pronounced like that either, I guess. To be or to exist. But the exact meaning is often debated. So, in other words, we don't know that either, for sure. But we know that his name does not mean I am that I am. So people say it on the internet, you can stop. All right. So from polytheism to monotheism, early Israelites worshipped multiple gods. I know people don't want to hear that, but I mean, if you read the Bible, this is pretty obvious, right? Including Yahweh, El, Asherah, and Baal. Over time, Yahweh absorbed El's traits, leading to monotheism. The Bible shows this transformation with early texts depicting Yahweh as one God among many. You can read that in Deuteronomy 32:8-9. If you want a video on how El is Yahweh's father, you go ahead and comment that below. And by the way, if you're a Christian or a Muslim, this should not be upsetting. You should want the truth about the gods, about your God, about your deity. You want to understand this stuff. You want to have this knowledge. This information should free you. If lying to yourself is how you stay in your religion. If cognitive dissonance is if denying everything that your preacher doesn't teach you or that you didn't learn growing up about God, then family, it's not the truth. Okay? Read this book, World War God's Biography of Yahweh. If you really want a close relationship with Yahweh, if you really want to or you just want to understand as a scholar like I do, Yahweh, if you want to understand who this God is, the divinity of this God, then family, get this book. The free audiobook is in the link at the top of my page, or the free audiobook you can find below. I love you all. Peace.